What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Lexi J Wellness Podcast. This is my host and husband, Brett Johnson. I kind of did that out of order. I'm Lexi Johnson. This is my co-host and husband, Brett Johnson. This week,
go.
What?
So there we go.
I know, there's a struggle. There's so much lead up to that, and I screwed it up. It's only up from here, though. This week, we're talking about the concept of capacity and how capacity is a state of mind. I think that we've all experienced this in one way or another, or maybe you're, reciting those self-limiting beliefs that make you believe that you are at your max capacity, that you cannot possibly take on another task or another role or stretch yourself or your potential. And I think that's false. I think you're selling yourself short. So we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about our own experience and how we have stretched, how we continue to kind of mold and expand our capacity, both personally, professionally, everything. What do you got?
Yeah, it's a big topic. I feel like there's a lot to talk about.
It's one of my things. I can't remember what book I had read it, that line specifically. Capacity is a state of mind. I can't remember what book I had read it in originally, but I remember kind of like stopping in my tracks and being like, damn, that is so true. And I remember in college and looking back, I'm like, this is laughable. It almost makes me embarrassed to admit this, but I was like, wow, I just felt like I was completely swamped. There was no way that I could take on more because I had a heavier course load. I was graduating in 3 years, so I took more classes. And, I was involved in like extracurriculars, which again, looking back, I'm almost embarrassed to admit that these were the complexes that really plagued me. Mm-hmm. But at the time, that was my life. And I felt like I was at my max capacity. I graduated and then moved on, and I kind of had like a lull period, but into the position of owning Lexi J Wellness and working as a full-time dental hygienist, I was like, okay, this is my max capacity. And it was so far beyond what I had previously juggled and thought that I was, kind of drowning in. And now to this day, I was like, wow, I mean, clearly I was juggling, or I was balancing another full-time job. So it did come with a whole slew of other stressors, but it has continued to adapt and continue to expand. And in every phase of growth I've experienced there has been that little phase where I was like, okay, this is it. This is as far as I can go. This is as much as I can take on. There's not enough hours in the day. I can't be more productive. And I've continued to kind of go through that period like we talked about last week of you're really sucking at something before you develop the confidence that you can handle what you've got going on. And I think that, as we mentioned last week, and we just continue to reiterate that a lot of times it's just that period of self-doubt where you're navigating it and you're obviously not good at it because it's the first time you've ever done it. So you're likely to quit early on before you've developed that evidence to back the belief and to continue pushing forward. So I think that kind of goes hand in hand. I think that it was an unplanned but nicely timed second episode to follow up, just because your capacity is far, far greater than I think that we give ourselves credit for. Like, you're so much stronger, so much more capable. You're so much, your potential and ceiling is so much higher than we're operating at currently. And I know that's true of myself. It makes me excited to think about the space and the area of opportunity we have. But I think that we just sell ourselves short so often.
Mm-hmm. So the way that I try to frame it in my mind, where it makes the most sense, is I think of it, and it seems self-explanatory in how we're describing it, is state or capacity as a state of mind. But when you put that into real world like context, you start thinking about it like, for instance, weightlifting. If you tell yourself you're done with the set, then you're going to be done with the set. Or if you tell yourself that 8 reps is as many as I can possibly get, then 8 reps is likely what you're going to finish at. But realistically, if you tell yourself that I'm going to go 2 more than I think I can possibly go, you'll likely get at least 1 more than what you set out to do initially. And it's really just a mental game, and it's you training yourself to push yourself past your limits. And that in itself is a very difficult thing to do consistently, because on a day-to-day basis, it's very difficult to consistently tell yourself that you can do more than you're currently doing, because you always get into a routine and a habit of doing one thing. And whether or not you're doing it purposefully, we are creatures of habit. And even if it's a good habit, sometimes you get like stale and stagnant because you stop pushing.
Absolutely. And not only creatures of habit, but creatures of comfort. So to your point of the exercise example, if you say you're going to do 8 reps, then there's a little comfort in knowing that the end is coming soon. But if you're saying I'm going to go to failure, then the end is kind of a question mark, and you have to push past that mental barrier. And if you're truly going to failure, it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to push your limits both physically and mentally. But that's kind of the ceiling that you have to crack in order to pursue your potential. I had heard something at some point, and this man was telling a story about he was at the gym and he saw another man's physique and he was just like blown away. So he went over and talked to him. And I think that it takes some vulnerability, especially for guys, to approach another man in the gym and kind of like ask for advice. And this guy was in good shape. And he was like, you know, how many reps do you do of this exercise or whatever? And the guy just looked at him. He was like, until I can't do anymore. And it's such a simple answer, but we're looking for that finite answer, the one that's going to get you where you want to go. But I loved that. He was like, until I can't do anymore. And then when you get to that point continually, the point where you can't do anymore 6 months from now is going to be your starter set.
Yeah, having a infinite mindset versus a finite mindset.
Fixed in growth.
Yep.
Yeah. I talk about this with my clients a lot, just because we have so many parents, mothers and fathers, and we haven't experienced this yet. We're not parents. But I can only imagine, because we do feel, we talk about this a lot. We feel like our schedules are extremely busy. We balance a lot of things and have a lot of obligations, but adding a child into the mix, like that is expanding your capacity so great. And then I'm sure that parents with one kid, you are just stretched so thin and you're thinking, okay, there's no way that I could possibly sleep less and continue operating. Like, this one tiny human is consuming all of my time and energy and attention and focus. There's no way that I could divide that and then continue being such a great spouse or employee, boss, whatever. And then you have another kid and you make it work. And then maybe you have a third kid and you continue to make it work, and you continue to add to your resume of being a kick-ass human. But it's just, I think it's out of obligation sometimes that you cultivate those skills and you prove to yourself until, I mean, more often than not, we're not going to put ourselves in those positions to prove that we can do it.
Right. A lot of times it's forced. You know, it's not because you're choosing to do more. It's because you have to do more. You simply don't have a choice. And that's whenever people learn what they are truly capable of. And maybe that's a breakthrough moment because you realize that you weren't reaching your full potential. And then you're able to apply that to a variety of other things.
Yeah. And some, like, out of survival, if you're in a desperate financial situation, you have to get a second job, and you thought that there's no way that you can continue delivering on what you're doing right now and add more, and then somehow you make it work.
Yeah. So with you, like you said, you were working a full-time job at the beginning of Lexi J Wellness, you know, on top of starting the business. And I remember those discussions that we had, because we would go back and forth on, was it time, you know, and the amount of time that you had to allocate to the business. And I remember it being a topic of conversation where we would kind of bounce around and say, well, you know, if you didn't have the full-time job and we eliminated that from the mix, think about the extra time that you would have. And inevitably, you've gone through phases, you know, now where you have employees, you know, so we've transitioned along the way, but each phase, you always think that you're going to have this gap. Like, your day is just going to, okay, well, I'm going to open up 2 hours of my day or 3 hours of my day because I don't have to do this anymore. And then inevitably you fill that void with something new. And then you realize, man, I could have been doing more all this time, but now that I've delegated something, now I realize that, you know, I can be doing this to enhance my business.
Yeah. I specifically remember thinking, okay, well, I'm working. At the time, my full-time job was an hour commute one way. So I would commute a total of 2 hours. I would work for 9 hours total.
Yeah. Just simply travel time alone.
Yeah. So that took 11 hours of my day. And I was a dental hygienist, so I would answer emails and messages and stuff between patients. So I was essentially kind of working in between there, but that blocked off 11 hours of my day work week or throughout the typical work week. And I remember thinking, okay, right now I'm getting up at 4 a.m. and I'm getting back home at 6, and then I'm working for several more hours. Like, if I go full-time Lexi J Wellness, it's just going to free up my entire day. Like, I'm going to have so much time. And like you said, if you're an ambitious person and you're wanting to continue to grow, then that time is going to be filled by something else. You're going to find a use or a productive use of it, or else you're going to go stagnant. And I don't really believe in stagnicity. So I think that if you stop pursuing that and stop expanding, then you're going to start to regress.
Right. Yeah. There is no neutral. There is no flatline growth. It's just you're either going up or you're going down.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can plug and play really anywhere in your life, because once you realize that you have so much untapped potential, then you start figuring out ways that you can improve in so many different areas. Be it your relationships, your professional life, spiritual life, whatever it is. And whatever your goals are, because each individual is going to have different goals, and whatever your goals are, then you can prioritize what where your limiting state of mind is, and how you can improve upon that.
I think and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, but personally, I think the biggest factor that's going to play in there in you pursuing it and sticking with that capacity stretch and expansion is the people that you surround yourself with, and whether that is directly in person or just joining a group and a culture that, one of my favorite sayings is, if the best way to adopt a desired behavior is to join a culture where that behavior is considered normal. And I think that the people that you surround yourself with, if they're not stretching and they're not continuing to expand their capacity, then I think that is one of the biggest factors in whether you stick with it and see success or you regress.
Yeah. Surrounding yourself. Was that a question?
Yeah. I think that would probably, that would be my answer as to what the biggest thing is and whether people succeed in that period. Because I think I had mentioned or alluded to it earlier, just there's a little, and sometimes it's not so little, sometimes it's a longer period, but there is that period of time where you think you're at your max, and then you start to adjust and it becomes norm. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, you can apply it to weight loss or weight gain. Your body goes through a period where it's regulating to the amount of calories you consistently eat, and it's going to go one direction or the other. So for instance, with weight loss and fat loss in particular, if you're in a caloric deficit, then your body will you'll consistently lose weight for a period of time. And then over time, depending on what your activity level is and what the percentage of deficit you're in, over time, your metabolism will regulate. And then that becomes the normal. Like, that is your maintenance. And in order to ramp it up a little bit, you have to go into a further deficit, just kind of taper down slowly over time. That's the best route for sustainable weight loss. But you go through that period where, okay, you're seeing progress, where you're feeling stretched, and then it becomes your normal, and you don't know any different because you've regulated to it. Now you don't know any different because this is how you maintain life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You can kind of apply that to so many different facets of life. Like, literally everything finds an equilibrium, because, your body in itself is always seeking to find a new normal, because like what you were just describing, if you're in a caloric deficit for so long, like, you're not just going to perpetually lose weight, or you'd go down to zero. Yeah. If you consume zero. That's just not, you get where I'm going with that. It's not a line straight down to zero.
Right.
So your body is always going to find that new normal, and you do that mentally as well. I feel like it's a good metaphor for how your mind treats things. And if you don't, set the next goal and make a plan, to reach a new capacity, then you're just going to stay where you're at, and you're not going to gain any traction. You're not going to get better. So I think that there's a lot to be said for just all the different facets of our life where we're always finding a new normal. And unless you're cognizant of your untapped potential that you're still trying to reach, then you're just going to settle. And so like Goggins talks about how the average human, they tap about 40% of their total potential. And I think that's 100% true. Like, it sounds like a crazy low number, but until you realize, if you're not in the personal development world and you're just getting started, it's wild. Like, whenever you first get started, I remember the first time we did 75 hard, and I felt just absolutely liberated because I realized how much untapped potential I had. Because whenever you're going through 75 hard, you start to realize how efficient you become. And I think that was one of the biggest things for me whenever I did the program the first time, was just the mental benefit. Physical benefits were great as well. Like, I saw amazing results because I was extremely strict with everything I did, and still am, every time I go through it, but I have different goals each time. But the first time, it was just a mental, it
was a breakthrough.
It was an epiphany. Yeah. I mean, I had this just, it was like a euphoria, it was a euphoric moment for me to experience that level of independence, as I felt like I had just reach this whole new level of me. And I think that whenever you first get into the personal development space, you get that. And unfortunately, so many people get that, and then that euphoric rush that you have in the beginning, it starts to wane, and then you start settling because that feeling is no longer there. All those positive mental feelings, the dopamine, the positive self-image, and you start realizing what your real potential could be, and then people stop. They don't keep pushing. And go ahead.
Well, I have a couple points to that, but you had mentioned 75 hard. I actually had this conversation yesterday with one of my girls who had just finished 75 hard. Lauren, if you're listening, shout out, congratulations. She's actually in law enforcement, and she has 2 kids. So when we were talking, I was asking what her, biggest hesitancy going into it was, and she said just a matter of time. Like, she has 2 kids, obviously. Those are gigantic time commitments with school, and they're in sports, but she's also a law enforcement officer, so she works sometimes 16-hour days. And she was like, managing that and getting my kids taken care of, making sure that I'm spending adequate time with my family, and working in 2 45-minute walks or 2 45-minute workouts, like, that was something that was really daunting to me. But now she was like, I made it work. I would do my walk on my lunch break, or I would wake up at 4:30 a.m. to make sure I got my workout in. Where beforehand, I would just justify that the time wasn't there. And it's a matter of carving it out and creating it, making it in a priority, and then making it happen. But you had said something like, when people reach that point and they're so excited and they kind of feel that rush and then start to fall back into it. I think that because when you first get started, you have such an area where you can chalk off, like, you can chip off milestones really quickly, and not necessarily like huge weight loss milestones, but you're doing everything for the first time and it's exciting. So while yes, you likely won't be super skilled at it because it is your first time through, you're also experiencing your first successful whatever, XYZ, whether that's being physical or professional. And that's exciting because it's super easy to accumulate wins if you have not accumulated any. But then once you're more established and you're at a point where
you literally went from 0 to 100.
Yeah. So then once you're at that point where, okay, the deviation is much, much smaller, where you're seeing that progression, and it's a lot more mentally taxing, I think, because then you're not seeing the gains. And you're you're acutely aware of every flaw or every criticism, which that's something that I definitely struggle with, especially in the nature of what I do, because I'm just like, I'm hyper aware of what my body looks like all the time. I record myself working out for 30 minutes every single day. So naturally, just the human experience and the way that your brain works, like, I'm definitely prone to having those days where I get down on myself because I'm hyper aware of it, and because I have executed at a level consistently over time now for 3 or 4 years, that it's become something that I kind of take a daily inventory of where my gaps are and what I could be doing better. So it is harder, where in the beginning it was so exciting because you could see those leaps And looking back, I wish I would have enjoyed that a little bit more and I was just constantly waiting to get to this point. And I'm sure years from now, I'm going to look back and say, wow, like I wish you would have enjoyed this time. So it is something where I need to be a little bit more present in that.
Going back to what you said though, where you see those big gains, or, you see those big jumps because you went from doing nothing to doing a bunch. And then all of a sudden, then it's like, wait a second, this isn't as exciting anymore. That's where you cultivate discipline if you keep going, because it takes that discipline to start seeing those slow incremental improvements. And it's not as exciting anymore. Then it becomes a day-to-day thing where if you just build it into your routine, because if you don't do it, then you feel out of whack, and you just have to know going into it that it's going to take that discipline every single day.
Yeah, and just novelty in itself is exciting. Anything new is exciting.
Yeah. And when that wears off, that's whenever you have to keep going.
Right. But when it wears off is really the bread and butter. That's when you're going to experience that progress and see the fruits of your labor. Because if you're constantly jumping from one new exciting thing to the next new exciting thing, then you're not allowing yourself that mundane period where you can actually cultivate the skill in order to see the progress. So when someone comes to me and they're like, well, I mean, I go from one thing to the next because I get bored really easily. Like I've several times I've had people say, well, I promise I'll do this for 3 months, but then I have to go to something else and then I'll probably come back just because I need to switch it up. Like I get bored really easily. And I'm like, you led into that statement with, I've never stuck to anything. I've never seen progress because you're constantly flipping that switch, and it's not something. It's
right. You just told me why you're not seeing success.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I'm guessing that, in that particular instance, where somebody basically admits that they don't see progress, and they said that they jump from program to program, then they're not jumping literally like they do it for 3 months and they do somebody else's for 3 months. There's probably 3 months that they do it, and then they wait 3 months or 4 or 5, and then they jump in and do somebody else's for 3 months.
Yeah. My thing is,
it's not a perpetual thing.
Yeah. My thing is always like, okay, well, that's completely fine. Yeah,
that's somebody else's prerogative.
Well, yeah, and I'm saying like, whether you see success with me or not is totally fine. Like I just want you to see success with someone. So
sure.
Whatever you decide to do, you need to stick with it, or else you're going to be perpetually disappointed and frustrated. And you're going to be one of those people that says like, well, I just can't exercise. It doesn't work for me, because you're not allowing yourself that period to gain traction. It's that flywheel effect. They talk about it in Atomic Habits, I believe, where you're pushing against the flywheel forever, it feels like, and you're not making any progress. And then eventually it starts moving and you're not pushing any harder than you were to begin with. But now the wheel is moving and you're
building momentum.
It's building momentum.
Yeah.
It's a snowball heading downhill.
Right. Doesn't matter how you're doing it. Just do it and stick to it. Because unless you stick with it consistently, then you're never going to see the results that you desire.
And the simplest answer is, okay, if you decide to quit, that's fine. What is your game plan?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that it's going to expedite any of the progress that you expect to see? Is it going to get you where you want to go that you're bitching about right now that you're not seeing?
Right. It's a compound effect. And that applies to everything. If you put, money aside and you expect it to gain traction through compound interest over time, putting money in an index mutual fund, and you put it in 10 years ago, you always give me a funny look whenever I start down this path.
I don't know what an index mutual fund is. I'm learning.
It's basically a fund that is
index mutual.
All right, I'm just going to proceed here. You put money in a mutual fund, and if it's going to start gaining interest, and if you don't keep it there over time, then it's never going to get those gains that you see the projections for. So if you're expecting an 8% annual return and you get that compound interest over time, then if you withdraw that money halfway through and you stop, you're never going to see that compound interest that you projected from your original investment, because you can look and see, okay, well, $1 invested in the stock market in 1800. $1, I've seen this in one of the books I just read. $1 invested in the stock market in 1800. If it was still invested today, it would be worth like $80 million
That's crazy.
just through compound interest. So the point is, this applies to a wide array of things. And if you don't allow time to do the work, that's half the battle, is just simply putting in the daily actions and then letting time do the work for you. Then you're never going to see the fruits of your labor.
Yeah, and I think
Giving up on yourself halfway, you're never going to get there.
Yeah, and that's what causes yo-yos in anything, just short spurts. Like people are streaky where they'll see success really fast, or they'll see success for a period of time, and then they'll go back to old habits. And if you're not willing to stick with it and continue pushing on it, then your capacity is going to continue to shrink back to whatever it was, and it's going to, embolden those self-limiting beliefs that we talked about earlier, where yeah, you can't take on any more than you have, because you continue to shrink back to what you believe your max is.
Right. Yeah, it's quite literally it's a state of mind. And if you tell yourself, if you give yourself those limiting beliefs, or if you preach those limiting beliefs to yourself, then they're going to be your reality. It is what it is. And if you're the person who's always talking about, well, I don't have time to do this, no, that's not the case. You do have time to do it. It's just not a priority, or you're not making the time to do it. What time do you sleep into? What do you do with your dead time? How much time do you spend on social media? How much time do you spend watching Netflix? How much time do you just sit there? There's so many gaps in time that you don't even realize that you do it, because it's a habit now. And if you became more productive throughout every day, you'll find time, because you'll make it a priority. I've made that a personal goal for myself, to stop saying I don't have time to do something. I replace that phrase with, no, I haven't made that a priority, or that's not a priority to me right now. Because that starts to train your mind the truth. Because if you tell yourself you don't have time, then you start to believe it, because you start to believe the bullshit that you tell yourself. Yeah. And I get tired of hearing people say that, now that I'm acutely aware of people's common misconceptions about themselves and about life in general. And about spilled your water. And I've gotten that way just by the things that I listen to and absorb, through the podcast, through the books. And I never want to come across like I'm the expert, because I'm always learning. If I apologize if it ever comes off like I know it all at this point, because I absolutely do not, and I'm still learning every single day.
Yeah, sometimes when I'm saying this, or when we're recording, I get caught up in a little bit of imposter syndrome, and I'm like, I don't know.
Right.
Someone is rolling their eyes at these kids in their 20s talking about this, but
I want to preface it with that, but
we're sharing our experience.
Right, but simply put, that doesn't make it any less true. When people say that they don't have time for something, it's simply not true. Unless you're Elon Musk, who has 5-minute increments, every single day. His schedule is down to the 5-minute increment. And, I would believe him if he told me that he didn't have time to do something. And it's still, he would probably argue that, no, I just haven't made that a priority, because I could replace, a 5-minute increment where I'm, not, getting much in return for it, with something else that I can make a new priority, or a higher priority rather.
Something, if you are looking into creating more time, cultivating more time, take an audit, and it's very convicting. Like, take an honest audit. You don't have to share it with anyone. Just schedule, write in a notebook, whatever time you wake up down to whatever time you go to bed, and literally write down, okay, from 6 a.m. to this time, I was laying in bed scrolling through social media. From this time to this time, this is what I was doing. If you, pick up your phone and scroll your social media mindlessly throughout the day, write it in that audit, and then go back and just look at what time, what you're using your time for, because it can be extremely convicting, and it is very, I don't know, convicting is the best word I can say, because looking at, I'll catch myself doing that. I'll be sitting at my computer, and when I want to run my head into a wall and I'm like, okay, I can't do this anymore. My eyes are burning. I don't want to look at this anymore. I go back to that comfort and I reach for my phone. I'll scroll social media. And before I know it, 15 minutes has passed. And that's a good use of my time that I could spend elsewhere. And then by the end of the day, when I'm complaining to Brett about being so busy and wishing that I could have, clocked out, quote unquote, clocked out or hung up work for the day, I can go back and be like, well, I should have used that time better. I could have used that time better. And then I could prioritize spending that time with Brett or just winding down however I would like to. So that's something that calling yourself out on your bullshit's part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I started setting screen time limitations just for social media. So I have a 30-minute cap before it shuts me off. And, you can still like bypass that if I need to get on there for something, which rarely do I need to get on there for anything, but sometimes I'll bypass it to go on and, like your post or something.
Yeah. And when you say bypass, it'll like alert you that, okay, you're out. Do you want to ignore this?
Right. Yeah. You can basically, click, get back on for 1 minute and then it'll time me out again, or 15 minutes or it'll time me out again. So anyway, with that being said, I think that's a great tool that a lot of people may not know that they have access to. But yeah, you can get on your devices and limit your screen time for certain apps. And I've just assigned it to like every social media app on my phone, which it tells you, plain as day that, as soon as you're about to hit your cap, it'll say that, you've got X time remaining. And I think that a lot of people could benefit from that, because 30 minutes it sounds like a lot, but that's, I would venture to say, way on the low end.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
compared to most people. I mean, your job is on social media to a certain extent, so it's a little bit different. But like the average person who just scrolls social media because that's what they want to do, with their free time, I'd be interested to know what that statistic is for the average American.
It would be sickening to know. And I use that sometimes as a cop-out. Like, I do work on social media, but I spend plenty of unnecessary time that I need to log out, close out, that I could use elsewhere. Another thing that I utilize a lot, and I think that's extremely productive when it comes to creating more time and just making the most of the time you have, is habit stacking. So I think that creating those rhythms and getting into a routine where if you are doing things at random, it's much less likely to stick. So when I talk to my girls and or just anyone that I work with, it's important to create an appointment with yourself. And if that means physically writing it down or putting it in your calendar, I will do this after this, or I will do 30 minutes of exercise at 7 a.m. The I then statements are really important. So I will work out after I brush my teeth. I will do 15 squats next to my desk after every email I receive, or after every time I open my social media. Mm-hmm. One way that I used to habit stack in college, and I always use this as an example, is I was obsessed with the show Scandal. So I only allowed myself to watch Scandal if I was on the treadmill. And I put some mileage on that treadmill because I had to get through Scandal. I do that right now there's like one fiction book series that I read, and I have it set on the treadmill, and I'll read that. And that's really the only time that I'll read that book. But I enjoy it, and it also passes the time a lot quicker. So if you want to stack things, whether it's the I then, that's more of a scheduling thing. So if there is a routine that's already in place, so after I insert something that's already in place for your day, whether it's involving your kids, or after my alarm clock goes off, I will put my tennis shoes on. That kind of just triggers habits. And the more you can create these triggers, the more seamlessly they're implemented into your day. Mm-hmm. So that's more of on the scheduling side. And again, I am a huge proponent of appointments. I think that people don't blow off doctor's appointments because they're too tired or because the day got ahead of them. They schedule them because they're a priority. They're really important to them. And I think that you should schedule appointments with yourself just the same. You're not going to ditch a parent-teacher conference because you were too tired or because
So yeah, you don't want to be like late to an appointment, or you don't want to skip an appointment, or you don't want to blow somebody off because you don't want to waste their time. So why would you want to waste your own if you make an appointment with yourself?
I think that's a huge thing. People don't, they say that they value their own time, but they don't spend it that way, investing the time into themselves that it's going to end up doubling it. You're going to get the energy from that workout. Your mood's going to be boosted, and then you're going to be able to spend the time following it with a lot more quality.
Right. Yeah. I think that if you asked 100 people in a room, if they valued their own time, 100 out of 100 are going to say, yes, I do. But then that same 100 people, I would say that a huge percentage of them, if you assessed what their daily schedule was and how they use their time, you can make a pretty quick argument that they do not value their time because they use it so poorly.
And the same could be said when you ask someone, okay, do you value your health? Absolutely. They're going to say yes. Then why don't you act like it? Why do you eat like you don't value your health? Why don't you exercise like you value your health?
Right.
If your health is important to you to be the absolute healthiest mom or dad or boss or friend, then why don't your actions align with it? Because at the end of the day, what you say is important to you and what you do to prove what's important to you are completely different things. And if they don't align, what you do is going to be what shows up.
Yeah. Yeah. I could trigger some people pretty quick with a comment on that topic. That makes me think of the people that it's going to piss some people off because it might be naming some people, but you have people reach out to you on occasion and they say, well, do you know what's in that food that you're eating? Do you know what's in that supplement that you're eating? Like it has this ingredient in it. And it's, let's say like an artificial sweetener, which artificial sweeteners have been proven to be just fine for you.
People get really upset about my sodium intake too.
Yeah. And it's very wild because 99% of the time it's somebody that it's very clear does not prioritize their health. And if they took any advice, from somebody, then it would be pretty evident that, in what they look like and how, they're doing in their journey, because there's so many people that just really want to troll. And if they really cared that much about the information that they're preaching to you, then they would be in a different situation than they're in.
Well, and I think also to that point, some people use those things as cop-outs, whether it's with their time or they're wanting to dive so deep into like nutrition. So for instance, I eat deli meat almost every day. I'm a big fan of Black Forest ham. People are up in arms about the amount of salt I put in my eggs or the sodium in my deli meat, and they let me have it in my Instagram DMs. I truly couldn't care less. I'm in my labs and blood work come back very healthy. So,
and mind you, most people are low in sodium. If you don't have enough sodium in your diet, then you're going to be dehydrated.
Yeah, there's a lot of, and I can't go into a lot of depth into it. I'd like to have Bailey on to talk about that. But anyway, for instance, people get up in arms about my sodium intake, and I always respond because like you said, it's kind of ironic the people that are sometimes messaging me about nitty gritty things like artificial sweeteners in
eggs are high in cholesterol.
They say eggs are high in cholesterol, or the artificial sweeteners in diet root beer or an energy drink or something like that. And I always say, when it comes to nutritional intake, the bulk of what's going to produce the results are your macronutrient intake, and if it's appropriate to you, if it's consistent for you and your needs. And if someone wants to go deeper into that and those spots are covered, like if your macros are taken care of and you're consistent with it and they're appropriate for you, then let's dive deeper. Yeah, if they have merit. But I think that some people want to go over that. They want to skip over the basics. They want to skip the foundational layer in order to overcomplicate the process. And then it's a cop-out because it's way too confusing. Then they're saying, well, I don't have time to do all the research and to shop.
How could I possibly get healthy if there's all these obstacles to get around?
Right. And I'm sure that we can this would upset a lot of Instagram, social media, like nutritional coaches, stuff that want to confuse the population, because that is something extremely common when it comes to giving any sort of health advice, is that they want to seem the authority and they want to recite a long list of things that they memorized in a textbook to prove that they passed a standardized exam. But if you can't put it into a basic terms that anyone can understand, that I don't believe that you know it well enough. And I don't believe that your end goal is to actually help someone. Because if that's the case, you're going to put it into terms that literally anyone can understand, literally anyone can apply, and they can implement into their life that day in order to start building the life that you want for them.
Yeah, the best coaches make something easy to digest. No pun intended when we're talking about food. But yeah, I'm not impressed by anybody that says something in such an intricate and, confusing way, even if it's absolutely 100% to a T true. I'm not impressed by that, because all you did was try to make yourself sound smart because you probably have a big ego. And if that's your goal, to sound smart to an audience, then great, you just accomplished it. But how many people do you think are actually going to be able to take that information home and apply it to their life and make themselves better? Is your goal to help people, or is your goal to sound smart? Is your goal to make people feel lesser about themselves because they don't know as much as you do? Or is your goal to give somebody a real life, applicable, what's the word I'm looking for?
Blueprint, game plan.
Yeah, a real life game plan that they can apply to their daily life to make themselves better, healthier, stronger, whatever the situation is, more successful.
Yeah, that's something genuinely that grinds my gears when it comes to fitness and health, just that entire industry. And since I am on social media so much, I see a lot of it. And I think that it's people that are taking advantage of people that don't know better. They're in a vulnerable position because they need help, and they're seeking out someone that does sound really educated. But if that's your goal, is just to confuse people with the language you use, that's not impressive at all. That just tells me you studied a textbook in order to pass a test. But if you can't apply it, if you have never helped someone that's in that desperate situation, then I don't give a shit what test you passed.
Right.
I don't think that, you got to put your money where your mouth is and show me that you can help change someone's life. You can meet them where they're at.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that there's just so many layers to that. And what got us started on this rant is just that the basics are the basics for a reason. If you want to see success, the foundational layer can't be skipped if you want to see sustainable success.
And there's a time and a place for the intricate, deeply scientific information, and there's an audience for that. But generally speaking, what we're getting at here is your general audience that's looking for help. People get on social media and follow other people if they think that they are getting good quality help. And unfortunately, there's a large segment of social media that is simply taking advantage of their audience, and they're using you. If social media is the king of, you are the product, because if you're not paying for the product, then you are the product. And it's not free. There is a lot of good free information out there, but the quality information is what you need to be seeking out, and it's harder and harder to find. But once you find it, you know it, because you're going to see results and you're going to see success. And people get found out pretty quick these days. So if somebody's been doing it for a fair amount of time, now obviously, if I hate to deter somebody from, giving somebody a chance just because they just got started, but you've been doing it for 3 years now, basically.
Yeah. And that's still baby when it comes to
the
grand scheme.
Right. In the grand scheme of things. Yeah. There's plenty of people who've been doing it for decades, but point being, don't just, trust somebody because they sound like they know what they're talking about, because a lot of times it's just a sales scheme, and all they're trying to do is sell you on something and make something more complicated than it needs to be. The true people that are out there to help are the ones that break it down to where it's a digestible amount, or it's digestible information that the average human being can understand and use.
Yeah, the delivery is really important. And also, I say this to a lot of people when they're looking for advisors on macro tracking. I think that, like I mentioned, the basics are the basics for a reason. So the people that are going to get you success, any number of people can tell you the exact same information, and you can apply it, and you can take that feedback and see success individually. However, the retention of you sticking with that person because you genuinely feel like they care about you and they want you to succeed, that's an entirely different aspect to the journey. And I think that it's one that's really, really undervalued, because it's not a linear process whatsoever. You're going to have ups and downs, and having someone on the other side that genuinely cares about you and your success and is invested in seeing you succeed is it's invaluable. And finding someone or a team that supports your growth and promotes that and is going to be there for every turn. Like I said, the basic information is out there and you could find it independently, but having people that are in your corner is something that I can't recommend enough.
Right. And once you find that person, or that resource, then you can dive in a little more into the specifics if need be. You have plenty of people that you work with that have, a thyroid condition, where they don't utilize their carbs in the same way or whatever, however that, what's one of those diagnoses?
Yeah, like PCOS or if they're diabetic or anything like that. And it's interesting because I'm talking in this way and it can definitely be applied to like me being that expert person or having that team. And I was thinking of it as in terms of like business, where if you, and I'm the one on the receiving end of the advice, if you listen to any, keynote speaker, they typically say about the same thing. The delivery is just different. Their personality is going to be played into it, but everybody's going to be talking about consistency and, little things add up and the compound effect and continued pushing. Like if you read personal developments, they typically have an overarching theme and they're just stated in a different way. And
and sometimes it hits different.
Yeah.
And it just takes that one way of saying something.
Yeah.
For it to really hit you. And you're like, oh, well, when you say it like that, it really makes sense.
Yeah. So like saying that in those terms, like I have mentors and people that I go to and people that I have consistent talks with that I seek advice from, that I have in my corner, because in that situation, I'm the one that's on the receiving end of the help. So whether it is a personal health or fitness journey or professional endeavor, I think that having that and having the people, we talked about stretching your capacity, and to kind of circle it back to the whole theme of this episode, because we've gone off a little bit. I think that just having people to reinforce that belief in you, because you're not going to believe it in yourself the entire time. And it's very easy to talk yourself out of because you've never experienced it and you haven't gone first. So you have to seek out people that know the way, that can lead you and that you trust.
Right. And like you said before, finding a community where the desired behavior is the normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just seeing it done by someone else emboldens you and shows that it's possible. Because like I mentioned, I work with a lot of women, or a lot of mothers and fathers. I do have a really good number of parents, and I'm not a mom. So they trust me despite the fact that I haven't navigated pregnancy, postpartum, motherhood, any of that, because we have so many women that I have helped in that scenario, and they can use them as an example. So right. I'm not even necessarily the model there. Like I give a blueprint, and I have excellent people that have shown the way, and they inspire others, because more often than not, the true influencers in this world are not the people with the blue check marks. They're not the people with the 6-pack abs. They're the busy moms. They're the full-time students. They're the dads that just got off a 24-hour shift, that are continuing to put their one foot in front of the other. Like, those are the really inspiring ones, because that makes up the mass population. And right. If you can see the person down the street that is just like you, that is changing their life and changing the lives of their kids and their mm-hmm. spouse, then it shows you can do it too. Yeah.
That's whenever you know that, you can do the same thing, because you see somebody that's just like you that did it. And then it's like confirmation, mm-hmm. you get that confirmation that, oh, well, I can do it. They have 3 kids. They have a full-time job. Their wife has a full-time job. If you're able to see that, in the real world, and not just think, well, of course she can, because she's an influencer and that's all she has to worry about.
Right. We put those qualifiers on someone else that sees success because they're not in the same situation as us. But if mm-hmm. you can see someone that came from a similar position, that has a similar hand dealt, and they're still doing it, then it's inspiring. And
right.
it shows
you give yourself permission to get, past that self-limiting belief and increase your capacity.
Yeah. And that's what I always talk about, like this domino effect thing. I know it sounds kind of cheesy. I have goosebumps thinking about it, but it does take so many of us to create the largest, most positive domino effect. And that's the mission that we're on, because not every single person can relate to every single person. So I'm going to need
A
an
variety of
army of
people.
people changing their lives and showing other people that it can be done as well. I need, every single busy person that had that self-limiting belief that overcame it themselves. And the work comes before the belief. You have to show up and you have to prove to yourself first. You have to know the way, guided by someone else that has gone first. And then you're going to inspire others. You are going to, like, the path that you're on right now is inspiring someone else, whether you realize that or not. Mm-hmm. Or if you're listening to this and you're at a point where you haven't made that change yet, know that you're also impacting someone else.
Right.
You're
always everybody's an influencer. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Whether or not you realize it, everybody's an influencer. Even if it's just one person that you're influencing, somebody's watching you.
Yeah. For the negative or the positive, what you're doing is going to cause a ripple effect. So it's just something to be mindful of. I think that's one of the things that when I dove into the domino effect and really got a little obsessive about it, like I'm obsessed with creating that impact and continuing to spread that. It's something that I believe in so strongly because I became keenly aware of the little things adding up and the little actions and the little interactions that I had that made a difference in someone else's life, for the negative or the positive. Because I've been shitty. I've messed up and it's rippled out, and I'm just more aware of that and more cognizant of the way that my actions have ripples. And I think that, whether you are someone that's really active on social media and quote unquote an influencer, or you are an average Joe that has a family, but you've got little eyes watching you. You've got people at work that are looking up to you, or looking to you for the example, and you're setting it, whether it's stated or not, whether you're in a position of leadership or not, you are setting the tone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just remember that the average person's operating at 40% capacity. Are you content with that?
I don't think you guys are 40% individuals. It makes me excited.
If you're listening to this, then you're not.
Yeah, I think so.
The point of this is for people that are looking to achieve success, greatness, to be better.
I feel like it makes me excited. Like, I get impatient thinking about how much room there is to succeed and how much room there is to create a potential, because I'm nowhere close to where I want to be. But I have that foresight, and I just have to, I have an unshakable faith in process and just understanding that the little things are going to add up because I've seen evidence of it. And I've gotten to this point, which we said earlier, I do get a little imposter syndrome because I'm still young in business, but I have a little bit of experience, and that experience that I have so far has proven to get me this point. And I know that for a fact, if I just continue doing those little things, that I'll continue on the trajectory that we've gotten to the point that we are. We'll just continue stretching. And I think that right now we're for sure in one of those periods where the capacity feels like we're at our max. Mm-hmm. And
we just had a long talk about that this morning.
Yeah, we did. That's when we decided what we were going to talk about. Because we're just contemplating, the growth of business and where to head and how to best take care of the people that put their trust in our hands. And in order to do that, I'm going to have to continue to stretch. I'm going to have to continue to expand myself. I'm going to have to continue to push and, draw that out in the people that I've added to our team, because I know that my capacity is nowhere near where it could be. And I know for a fact that's the same for my employees also. And it makes me just as excited for their potential as it does for my own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Always seeking to find that untapped potential it's a liberating thing. It's hard. It's not easy. If it was easy, everybody would do it. Everybody would be doing it. But yeah, it's necessary if you're going to push the limits, and be above average.
Yeah, and no one wants to be unhealthy or unsuccessful. There's not a single person that would say that they want poor mental health, poor physical health. They want zero energy. They want an unfulfilled life. But the difference between the people that are going to reach that and the people that aren't is not the goals themselves, because everyone would say that they want to be happy, successful, healthy, fulfilled. But it's a matter of the systems in place and the consistency of pushing beyond that comfort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a huge part of fulfillment, is pushing past what you believe to be achievable, because nothing you're never going to find that level. You're likely not going to find fulfillment in just, the norm. You have to push past what you perceive to be the norm in order to really untap what's truly possible. Yeah. And that sounds very cheesy. Kind of is a cheesy phrase in the way I said it, but it's true. I mean, like ultimate fulfillment. I never feel fulfilled on a day where I don't do a lot. Like I feel very fulfilled on days where I bust my ass.
Yeah, kind of the going to bed with an empty tank. It proves your, I don't know how to say it.
Self-worth.
Well, and I hate to say that because I'm an Enneagram 3, so 3s often kind of evaluate our self-worth on our productivity, and I don't necessarily want to preach that, but it definitely plays into kind of the audit that I take at the end of the day. But just understanding that you're capable of so much more, and it's not necessarily productivity when it comes to professionalism. Like, I would venture to say that you're not operating at your capacity as a mom, as a dad, as a teacher, as a coach, as a friend. And that should be not necessarily convicting that, hey, you could do more. Like, why aren't you doing more? But it should be exciting that you can do more.
Right. And everybody has their weaknesses. I mean, we certainly do. There's certain categories that we can definitely be better in. And you're never going to be perfect at everything. And you can go all throughout life and you're never going to be perfect. You're never going to have a perfect balance. Balance is a whole nother topic of discussion in itself.
Yeah, I just think at the end of the day, you get one life here. And if you're not striving to optimize it and really take advantage of the opportunity that you have to be alive, then I think that we're doing a lot of disservice.
Right.
So it should be exciting. I hope that you guys, feel energized after this. I feel excited just to continue a little bit better than I did earlier on our talk, because it can be defeating when you get to that point and you feel like you can't push any harder, or you've kind of reached a point of, okay, what do we do now? Because I'm at my max. But I know for a fact that I've yet to actually reach that max. It's just a matter of being in that period where I'm uncomfortable. A temporary discomfort allows for a lot more comfort long term. So I think that that's definitely something that could be applied to so many different situations, and we kind of laid out a lot of examples here. But
I told you there was a lot to talk about.
There really is. It's something that can be applied to so many different aspects of life, and I think that if you guys found value in it and you'd share it with a friend or you share it on social media, seriously, we would appreciate it so much. We've really enjoyed hearing your guys' feedback. We're for sure getting a little bit better little by little. I know that the beginning of this podcast was brutal. I told you it was only going up from there though, and I believe it did. So if you guys found any value in it, please share. We appreciate it so much. But until then, we'll talk to you guys later.